Welcome back once again. Welcome to another Sabbath afternoon Bible study. We're going to touch on a very important topic. It's one that I have been observing over time, and the discourse involving this particular topic, it has been wide and broad, and so we want to take a deep look, a biblical examination of this, and it is the issue of does Adventism needs a reset? Does Adventism need a reset? We see many people are calling for a reset, left, right, and center. Some of them are persons who are within the Adventist movement. Others are former Adventists, and there are groups otherwise who are advocating that it is time that the Adventist movement change its whole focus so it can get more traction. So we want to take a deep look on the issue of, do we need a reset as Adventists, or does Adventism need a reset? We're going to take a fulsome look on Bible study as it relates to the clamoring and the call about Adventism needing a reset. And the reset sometimes can mean several different things. The reset can mean we need to revive our faith, or we need to reform our practices, or we need to reignite our mission focus. We need to come to some common agreement and understanding. Farmer, enough blessings. Welcome to this afternoon Bible study. Enough respect. Happy to see you once again. I hope you and your family are doing well. We are coming from a very far place, Augustown to be exact. And I want to wish you and your family happy holidays, and may you enjoy the best of the new year to come. Going back to the topic of, the reset that is now clamoring for, we can look at it from many different angles too. We can look at it from the outside. Does Christianity or religiosity needs a reset? We can see pastors living lavishly. We see people prophesying left, right, and center as to the coming of the Lord. I saw recently where a prophet, so-called prophet, declared that he got a vision from God that the world is going to come to an end sometime in 2025, and he sets out to build several arks. These, from where I sit, are just merely the devil playing games with people's mind who are easily cauterized by deception. So today we want to take a look at the clamoring for a reset within the confines of Adventism. I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, and I make no bones about that. I also will make no bones about the fact that the Seventh-day Adventist movement is God's remnant church. Scripture backs up that. Our doctrine and understanding of the Scripture back that up. Do we need a reset? Let's begin from the book of Matthew chapter 16 and verse 18. The book of Matthew chapter 16 and verse 18. And it says, I say unto thee that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. in this dialogue between Christ and Peter, Christ was saying literally to Peter, "Thou art Peter, I am Christ, and upon this rock I will build my church." Now, Peter, by definition, in the Jewish understanding, mean a pebble or Petros. So what Jesus is saying to Peter is that you are this little pebble, but I am this rock upon which I will build my church, or the church is built on. So the notion that Seventh-day Adventism needs a reset has gained traction in 2025. Several interconnected factors are fueling this push. But a core concern is that Adventism or Adventists often prioritize intellectual knowledge of prophecies and health teachings over transformative relationship with Christ, leading to hypocrisy, moral failures, and toxic faith without the gospel's power. Added to that, a broad cultural drift, such as social media, materialism, and autopilot living, are seen as the disconnecting believers from God, prompting loud vociferous call for a spiritual reset, giving rise to splintering reform movement, accusing the main church of apostasy. And when we talk about this, the splintering, we're talking about present truth ministries or independent ministry. A lot of them have taken it upon themselves to bash mainstream Adventism, or believe, as in the case of the shepherd one, that they are given full autonomy or authority by God to correct, reprimand, and chastise nominal Adventism. But we know from the Bible that God's church is not to be toyed with. Many people have been toying with God's church. Pastors, conference leaders, you name it. So we want to take a look and see where we go as it relates to the clamoring of a reset. So to get a clear understanding of this issue, the character of the first church is vital in this discussion of a reset. Acts 7 verse 38 declared, "This is he that was in the church in the wilderness with the angel which spake to him on Mount Sinai, and with our fathers, who received the lively oracle to give unto us." So, which church here is Paul in the book of Acts speaking of? Of course, he was talking about the church, Israel as a church. That's the first reference we have to a church. I mean, looking back historically, this is the first reference we have about a church. And this was specifically in reference to the children of Israel. So what was the context then, or the background of Acts chapter 7 and verse 38? You see, the context the background is Stephen is addressing the Jewish Sanhedrin, recounting Israel's sacred history to show that God's presence and truth were not limited to the temple. He points to Moses as a central figure who foreshadows Christ, yet was rejected by Israel, just as they rejected Jesus in his current time. The congregants of the church in the wilderness, Israel, were of the same character of those in Stephen's time who were willingly who were vociferously calling for a reset. So the historical connection is made here by Stephen. The patriarchal descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who experienced the Exodus, saw this demand for a reset repeatedly. So it was new to Stephen, it was new to Paul, and it definitely is not new to us today. But Stephen reinforces that Moses is part of their shared religious heritage, not someone to be rejected, considering the constant demand for a reset. And we see the same thing playing out today, where within Adventism, you have people clamoring for a reset. So vociferous is this clamor that former Adventists are willing to go out on a limb and call Adventists Babylon. Some of them make some very, very disparaging remarks on social media about the church. Some go as far as to say they are of the devil. Some go as far as to call the Adventist movement the most corrupt movement or Christian movement in modern time. Now, what is driving that is the demand and the clamoring for a reset. So let's look at the historical link. You see, Stephen emphasized that Moses belonged to the patriarchal lineage of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who underwent the Exodus, highlighting that Moses is an integral part of their common religious tradition, rather than a figure to be dismissed. So what Stephen here is suggesting is that, listen, what we are clamoring for is not consistent with what we have originally. And what we have originally is way better than what we are clamoring for now. So let's hear how Genesis chapter 32, 22 to 28, look at this matter. Reading from verse 22. And he rose up that night, took his 2 wives and his 2 women servants and his 11 sons, and passed over the ford Jabbok, talking about Isaac. And he took them and sent them over the brook, and sent them over that he had. And Jacob was left, talking about Jacob, and Jacob was left alone. And they wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint, as he wrestled with him. And he said, let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. And he said unto him, what is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince thou hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. So here we have a background as to the reason why we get the children of Israel, a nation or their forefathers who wrestled with God. Remember now, Jacob was a deceiver. So the name Jacob translates to heel grabber, supplanter, strifer, or a deceiver. Which mirror his early experiences. At birth, he grabbed Esau's heel, Genesis 25 to 26. Later, deceived both Esau and Isaac, and depended upon human cunning rather than faith to secure blessing. In summary, a reset of character and spiritual outlook was done on Jacob. But this reset was one to move him from the character of a supplanter to one of a righteous harbinger of the gospel and character of God. But that's not what the reset that we're calling for now is demanding. It is demanding a reset to look like the world that we are living in. So the name change of Jacob to Israel birthed a nation that ebbs and flows from faithfulness to apostasy. In the book of Acts, Stephen recounted their history leading up to their crucifying their Redeemer. Physical Israel or corporate Israel rejected their divine calling to be agents of the gospel of this world. Thus, spiritual Israel, the remnant church, is now tasked with that responsibility. So, physical Israel demanded a reset, got a reset, and go off course. The gospel was then given to the Gentiles, through which we is now birthed the Seventh-day Adventist Church as God's remnant people, carefully crafted and deliberately designated to do the work that the nation of Israel was designated to do. So, at this current juncture, looking back on the history, Isaac, Jacob, and Abraham, what happened, how the nation of Israel evolved, how they eventually lost their divine instruction, how the Gentiles took up the mantle, and now we're at this place where we see the current dynamics, the current members of Adventism within and without are demanding a reset. So the question is, do we need a reset? Does Adventism needs a reset? Let's look at Ezekiel 14, verse 22. Yet behold, therein shall be left a remnant that shall be brought forth, both sons and daughters. Behold, they shall come forth unto you. Ye shall see their way and their doings, and you shall be comforted concerning the evil that I have brought upon Jerusalem, even concerning all that I have brought upon it. You see, God is reminding them of their constant desire of a reset. Ezekiel 20 and verse 43. And there shall you remember your ways and all your doings, wherein you have been defiled, and you shall loathe yourselves in your own sight for all your evil that you have committed. So God is saying, from day one, you were clamoring for a reset. Clamoring for a reset. So, as it stands, Adventism has grown leap and bounds. Adventist Church was officially organized in 1863. It started with approximately 3,500 members across the 125 churches. The movement experienced rapid growth, reaching about 75,000 members by 1901 and expanding globally. Currently, the church has a global membership exceeding 23.5 million adherents, making it one of the fastest diverse Christian denominations with a presence in almost every country in the world. So what we have is a big denomination, a big church movement, which now we find the call is vociferous, not just only in one corner, but widespread all over the world calling for a reset. The demand for a reset is from within and without. Seventh-day Adventist Church 2025 Revival and Reformation Initiative calls for a spiritual reset to refocus on Christ amid legalism and complacency, preparing for end times through prayer, unity, and mission. One of those individuals that are stridently calling for a reset is a former Adventist. I'm not so sure if she's a former Adventist, but she is one of those strident opposer of Adventism. Her name is Colleen Tinker, a strident YouTube Adventist critique. She centered her adversarial opposition that it remains too focused on law-keeping, misrepresent the gospel of grace, and old doctrinal patterns she viewed as inconsistent with core biblical Christianity. So what Ms. Tinker is saying is that Adventism needs a reset. Adventism needs to re-examine the way how it teaches or understands certain doctrine. Against this background, let us examine the desire for a reset and its outcomes. The first call for a reset took place in heaven. The first call for a reset happened in heaven. So let's look at what it looks like. Isaiah 14 verse 12 gives us a summary of that demand for a reset. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nation? For thou art said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God, I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the cloud, I will be like the Most High. It is on this basis 1/3 of the angels in heaven was deceived. Satan was saying, I am a better alternative than God. With God, he is too strict and he is too arbitrary. But with me, you will have total freedom. No law to obey, total freedom. So, in effect, Satan launched a policy demanding a reset. Demanding a reset. So, what was the result of this reset that Satan demanded? Revelation 12 verse 7, 8 and 9 gives us a picture of the demand for that reset, or rather, it gives us the result of the demand for that reset. Revelation chapter 7 declares, and there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil, and Satan, which deceived the whole world, he was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So the reset didn't work well for Satan. The reset didn't work out well, or the demand for the reset didn't work out well for the brightest angel in heaven. Did not work out well. In fact, he, along with 1/3 of the angels, were booted from heaven. So let's see how other such situation ended up. The first demand for a reset on earth was initiated in the Garden of Eden by way of deception. So what we have now is a reset was demanded in heaven. That cry failed. Satan and his angels were kicked out of heaven. Now here on earth, a reset is now initiated. And a reset is a demand to break that connection between God and humanity. So, Genesis 2 verse 16 and 17. It says, "And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, Of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of knowledge and of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it. For the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die." So, Genesis 3, 1-5 said, "Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, You shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, You shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said unto the woman, You shall not surely die. For God doeth know that in the day you eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be as God, knowing good and evil." So, the devil is making it clear that, listen, what you need is a reset, because what you have is not working in your best interest. What you need is a reset of this arrangement. God tell you that you will die, you don't have to believe that. Because if you get a reset, it therefore means you will be like God. So the dynamics is laid bare. All you need is a reset. And so the result of that demand for a reset, Genesis 3:23 and 24. "Therefore the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims and a flaming sword, which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life." So what we have here is a consistent pattern. Satan demanded a reset in heaven, he was kicked out of heaven. Satan encouraged, inveigled, and deceived Eve and Adam to demand a reset in the Garden of Eden. They too were dismissed from the Garden of Eden. So the first attempt to reset God's worship order. Now, in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. And Abel, he also brought of the firstling of this flock, and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering. But unto Cain and to his offering he had no respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. And the Lord God said unto Cain, Why art thou wroth? Why is thy countenance fallen? If thou doest well, shall thou not be accepted? And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door. And unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. See, again, we have a clamoring for a reset by the actions of Cain. God says, when you come to worship me, bring a lamb, because the atonement for sin can only be done through the shedding of blood. But Cain, desiring a reset, wanting to rearrange God's worship standard, carried the fruits of his labor rather than a lamb. So let's see how that worked out also. The result: and Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and slew him. So every time the demand for a reset took place, disaster strikes. Nash Israel, in a national sense, they too called for or demanded a reset. Listen to this. Then all the elders of Israel gathered themselves together and came to Samuel and to Ramah, and said unto him, Behold, thou art old, thy sons walk not in thy ways. Now make us a king to judge us, like all the nations around us. But the thing displeased Samuel when he said, Give us a king to judge us. Here again, the nation of Israel demanded a reset. It was God who was their ruler and God was their king. So they wanted a reset that would look everything like the heathen nations around them. What was the result? Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, Nay, but we will have a king over us, that we also may be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battle. Well, let's see how that worked out. 1 Samuel 28, 5 and 6. And when Saul saw the host of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart greatly trembled. And when Saul inquired of the Lord answered him not, neither by dream, nor by Urim, nor by prophets. 1 Samuel chapter 3, 1 to 4 give us the result of this demand for a reset. Now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines and fell down slain in Mount Gilboa. And the Philistines followed hard upon Saul and upon his sons, and the Philistines slew Jonathan and Abinadab and Malchishua, Saul's sons. And the battle went sore against Saul, and the archers hit him, and he was so wounded of the archer. Then said Saul unto his arm-bearer, Draw thy sword, thrust me through therewith, lest these uncircumcised come and thrust me through and abuse me. But his arm-bearer would not, for he was so afraid. Therefore Saul took a sword and fell upon it. You see, the demand for a reset always ends in disaster. Always end in disaster. From heaven, in the Garden of Eden, to earth, to the children of Israel. You see, the demand for a reset in Adventism must be seen in the context of the great controversy. Let me say this one more time. The demand for a reset must be seen in the context of the great controversy. Many people look at the name or the word, the great controversy, and believe it is just a word thrown out just to make people feel like something is happening. But upon close examination of the word controversy, we would find that the word controversy means an argument or a debate, if you will. And so, here we have a debate between good and evil, between righteousness and unrighteousness, ultimately between God and the adversary. So the Bible only presents two churches, the chaste virgin and the harlot. The chaste virgin is described in Revelation chapter 12 and verse 1. And there appeared a wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. So here we now have the chaste virgin described, that's God's true church, and now we have the apostate church described, Revelation 17 verse 1 to 1, 2, 4, 5. It says this. And there came one of the seven angels, John the Revelator was in vision, and he said, and there came one of the seven angels, which had the seven vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great war that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. And the woman was arrayed in purple, scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlot. So we have two churches. One is keen to consistently walk in the path of righteousness, as prescribed by God. And then we have another church keen to distort God's objective. In other words, crying for a reset. God says keep the 10 commandments. The apostate church says you don't have to keep 10, you keep 9 or as much as you feel like. Demanding a reset. You see, there is no question in my mind within Adventism, individually and collectively, as a movement, God's remnant church, there are those who are yelling loudly on the various social media platforms, various different ministries. We want a reset. We want a reset. There's a woman by the name of Claudia Allen. She is currently leading one of the charge, shouting the loudest, we want a reset. Listen to Miss Claudia Allen's statement. Who cares? Who cares? What? When are we going to turn off the Daniel and Revelation seminars and start reviving the dead churches in our conferences? It's Claudia Allen shouting loud on top of her voice, who cares? Who cares? When are we going to turn off Daniel and Revelation seminars and start reviving the dead churches in our conferences? Venting our frustration with an overwhelming focus on prophecy seminars, especially on Daniel and Revelation. Urging attention instead to church renewal, practical ministry, rather than prophetic, listen, prophetic speculation. Prophetic speculation. That's what Miss Claudia Campbell is demanding. She is demanding a reset. Stop telling people about prophecy and Daniel and Revelation. Reset everything and now focus, as she would want us to do, on reviving the dead churches. Bear this in mind. God specifically told Peter, "You are Peter, but upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." So what Miss Claudia Allen is doing, she is looking through the lens of deception. She is feeling that somehow the church is collapsing. And if the church is collapsing, then we need a reset to save it. When God himself told you from the scriptures, my church is built upon this rock, Jesus, and the gates of hell will never prevail against it. So, Claudia Allen loudly advocates for a reset. Who cares? Who cares when we are going to turn off the Daniel and Revelation? See, Claudia Allen is not in tune with what is required. As a matter of fact, she is not paying attention to the result of former claims, former demands of a reset. So, listen to Matthew chapter 16, 14 to 18. A discussion was taking place between Jesus and his disciples. And Jesus asked them, "Who do they say I am?" Well, some of the disciples begin to answer promptly. Some say thou art John the Baptist, some Elias, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. But Jesus then pointedly asked them the question. He said unto them, "But whom you say that I am?" And Simon Peter answered and said, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered and said unto him, "Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father in heaven. And I say unto thee, thou art Peter, upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." So, looking at Miss Claudia Allen's case, it smacked of a case when the Levites were carrying the ark, and one man, seeing the ark falling, decided to help out God in protecting it. He was struck dead. Miss Allen, looking at the church, perceived that it is falling, now demanding a reset. So, God's remnant church, like physical Israel, has seen its fair share of pitfalls and glory. As Christ was emphatically declared, "Upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." Who is Miss Claudia Allen to want to challenge God? Who is Miss Claudia Allen to want to determine what message we preach in order to remain relevant? But I want the likes of Miss Claudia Allen and those who are clamoring for a reset within Adventists to bear this in mind. We are on the last leg of the relay. pleading for the baton. The three angels' message must now make a spirited dash for the finish line. So, our focus should not necessarily be on a reset, but it's to dash as hard as is possible to the finish line, bringing the three angels' message to the podium. You see, the church, as we know it, don't need a reset. What we need to focus on is upon the doctrines that have made this church who it is. I have no doubt in my mind that there are issues within the church that we need to address. Some of them personal issues, some of them policy issues. Some of them sometimes are maybe doctrinal issues. But that's not where we are to, those are not supposed to be the ingredients that we should be used to demand a reset. We have seen what the demand for a reset called in heaven. We have seen what the demand for a reset caused in the Garden of Eden. We have seen how a demand for a reset caused the first murder. We have seen the demand for a reset when the leaders approached Samuel demanding to be like the world or the nations around them. And every single one of them end up exactly the same way. Disastrous. So, Miss Claudia Allen and others are also now in our current day and age demanding a reset. You see, I don't know where the idea comes from that if we keep doing the same thing over and over, we're going to get a different result. I don't know where that comes from. As far as I know, based on what I know, that's the clearest definition of insanity. So, I want us to understand this. The church is God's appointed agency for the salvation of men. It was organized for service, and its mission is to carry the gospel to the world. From the beginning, it has been God's plan that through His church shall be reflected to the world His fullness and His sufficiency. During ages of spiritual darkness, the church of God has been as a city set on a hill, from age to age, through successive generations. The pure doctrines of heaven have been unfolding within its borders. So, if there are two churches, one an apostate church and one God's remnant church, if the duty of the remnant church is consistent with Christ's demands, what kind of reset do we need? What kind of reset do we need? You see, when we look at the result of the many demand for a reset, we should be now scared of the idea of a reset. But we're not scared of the idea of a reset because Satan has not done or is not done with God's church. He is determined to foist the idea of a reset upon God's true church. I have entered into many debates on Facebook with former Adventists and some descriptive word that they have used about God's church is none too pleasing. Not only that, I have seen some pastors done some things in God's true church, realigning God's church, resetting God's church. I recently earlier was looking at the television program, and there was a Sabbath program that is being done at a certain church, pastored by one Carlton Bird, who is a conference president, so far as I understand. And that they were dramatizing the birth of Jesus Christ. As I saw, they changed their headgear, got mics, and was rapping in the church about Christmas. Rapping in the church about church with up-tempo, upbeat church music in the church. Effectively, those dramatizations is demanding a reset. Now, this from where I sit is a Christmas program. Now, what does Christmas have to do with God? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. There is very little information about the birth of Christ in the Bible. Very little information about the birth of Christ in the Bible. There is an abundance of information about the death of Christ. So if there are so few information about the death of Christ, where no one up until now from the Bible, historically, cannot declare that Jesus was born on the 25th of December. No evidence, none whatsoever, can be brought to suggest that evidentially Jesus was born on the 25th of December. No one can produce such information. None. But there are information from the Bible to prove that Jesus was crucified on the 6th day of the week and rose on the 1st day of the week. So, why are we demanding by these programs and dramatization, demanding a reset to believe in something that does not have nothing to do with God? You see, I want to let the world know, and those who are watching. Here is a particular quote from the book Acts of the Apostles, written by Ellen White. She said, quote, pointed quote if you may, enfeebled and defective as it may appear, the church is one object upon which God bestows in a special sense his supreme regard. Let me read that one more time. Enfeebled and defective. In other words, we are at times in the same kind of situation that nominal Israel was in. The ebb and flow between apostasy and faithfulness. So we are not much different from them. So here, the pen of inspiration is giving us a clear description of the condition of God's remnant church and the outcome as instructed by God that no matter what we see happening, the gates of hell will not prevail against his church. And feeble and defective as it may appear, the church is the one object upon which God bestows in a special sense his supreme regard. It is the theater of his grace, in which he delights to reveal his power to transform hearts. As I close this Bible study, I want to express a word of caution to those who are demanding a reset, to take a look at history and see how the demand historically in heaven, in Eden, in national Israel, in Israel as it relates to the Gentiles, how the demand for a reset ended up. Like I said before, you cannot keep doing the same thing over and over and expect to get a different result. So in closing, I want to warn those who are clamoring for a reset to look at the past and see how the call for a reset worked out. Satan was thrown out in heaven. Adam and Eve was thrown out of the Garden of Eden. Cain killed Eden and become, Cain killed Abel and become a refugee. Saul lost his crown. Now Miss Claudia Allen is demanding a reset. That we must abandon the past, abandon the true doctrines, and make the church into a social club. It will not work well for the likes of those who are influenced by the world, demanding a reset of Seventh-day Adventism. It will not work well. It will not work out well. I want to say thank you for being here with me this afternoon as we come to the end of another Bible study, important, interesting Bible study. Does Adventism need a reset? Let us be careful in how we tread. Instead, let us take up the banner, carry forward the message of the gospel, because undoubtedly, looking around us, we are speedily heading towards the time of earth closing ministry, closing history. God bless. See you next week.